Good afternoon, everybody. 大家午安. Good evening to friends in the Western Hemisphere. How are you all? Welcome to our lecture today. My name is Heng and today is the 22nd of February. We are actually into Pisces, and for those of you in California and Europe, it is the 21st of February. Glad you're with us. We're exploring Master Empty Cloud's picture biography. So that's what we have for today, and I'd like to ring my handbell 3 times and invite those of you who would care to do so to make 3 half bows from where you're sitting, and then Zhang Man and Chen Yu will both be our Dharma requesters today. All right? So let's ring the bell and bow along. Here we go. First bow, second bow, third bow. Okay, Zhang Mama and Chen Yu, if you would like to request Dharma, please go ahead and do it now.
恭请大德圣体为此法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱死，离苦得乐，速证无生。
Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahadi sammyao samputoshe.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahadi sammyao samputoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. 好的，二位感恩。All right, I accept. Glad to be able to join you all. Now, let's see. We've still got some protocols to do here as we get underway. Let's see. There we are. All right. Further, we would like to, gonna close that. There we are. All righty. We would like to acknowledge country and to say that got the wrong folks here. It's not the Pomo people. Hold on here. Here we go. We would like to respectfully acknowledge the Kombumeri people of the Ugambe language region, who, as traditional storytellers and custodians of the land, protected the lands, the waters, and the air where our monastery is located. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and all First Nations people whose sovereignty was never ceded. 我们恭敬地承认与冈北语族的贡布玛丽人是我们寺院所在地的传统叙事者和守护人。我们向过去、现在和未来的长者们致敬，并且向所有从来没有放弃主权的第一民族的原住民致敬。Okay, further, we are going to continue our protocols to get going here. The bell sound wide resounds throughout 100 million worlds. The Buddha's law is heard and spread all throughout the triple world. The wondrous sounds that everywhere fill the Dharma realm with peace. May those who hear it gain the strength to follow in faith the Buddha's path. 众生传3000劫内，佛法扬万亿国中，共训其法界和平，利益报贪恼后的。That's the way it goes. That's the way they say it. How they sing it, it's a work in progress. We'll work on it. All right. Glad you're with us once again. We are, there we go. All right. We are in starting the last week of February here, and we've been telling the story of our grand teacher, Master Empty Cloud, Xuyun Lecture. And he is, when you travel in China or where the Chinese Buddhist tradition flourishes, people remember him as one of the most important monks to come along in hundreds of years. And one of the things he did was reinvigorate the Chan school, which had fallen into, originally there were 5 different schools in Chan, 5 different subgroups. And they, one of them in particular, had pretty much stopped. It was not being transmitted. Its teachers, its stories, the Weiyang school. And Master Empty Cloud revitalized it, got it started again. And Master Shen Xiahua, our founder, Master Shenhua, was named as number 9 of the teachers of that school, along with a few others, including Master Haideng and others. So Master Empty Cloud is the progenitor, what's the word? He's a milestone figure in the history of Chinese Buddhism. And yet, as we find out, as we've been studying his picture biography, he didn't want to be a monk at first. He wanted to be more like an immortal, that is to say, somebody who ran free in the mountains, grew his beard, didn't cook food, ate pine nuts and drank spring water, and didn't follow your rules, thank you very much. That was his style until his deeper vows kicked in at a certain age. And he met a monk who said, yeah, that's great. You want to keep your human body alive for centuries? You can do that. But of course, that's really selfish, you know. And just by kind of holding up that mirror to him, Master Empty Cloud realized that this is true, that that path that he was on was freeing, it was liberating. You're beyond the dust of the world, but you're of no use to anyone but yourself. And the occasional storyteller who just keeps your legend going. So he came down out of the mountains into the monastery ate cooked food, put on clothing that he'd been running without, put on shoes. Imagine how encumbering, what a burden shoes are when you don't need them. They just pinch your toes. They make your feet hot or too cold. He didn't need anything. He was free in his body, but the inner side, the inner part, the spirit, the vows, the Buddha nature was hungry, even though his body was able to do things that there were stories about him when he was still unbound in the mountain. They say his eyes glowed. He had I don't want to say feral. He had an unusual look to his appearance. And when he came down out of the mountains, he had to cut his hair, cut his beard, take a bath, put on clothes and shoes, eat cooked food, and become more human than he was. A xian, shan xian, the Chinese character for what he was back then is a picture of a human next to the character for mountain. So a man of the mountains who is more mountain than he is man. So America, here in Australia, we have some legendary characters who have that kind of. In America, we've got Paul Bunyan and Big Mike Fink, King of the River, and Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett kind of characters, but they don't have this merging with nature that is the Xian. Now, was he a Taoist? It's not accurate to call him a Taoist because he didn't. Taoism is very much a teaching of inner and outer. You have to aspire to certain principles. Master Empty Cloud's dad, his father, when he realized that his son had a propensity to go out into nature and disappear, which is to say, turn his back on the fruits of society that was his birthright. Had Master Empty Cloud wanted to do so, he could have followed his father and become a public servant, maybe a judge, maybe a bureaucrat, scholar. He could have done all those things. He didn't want that and tried to escape from that path that his dad and that all of popular society, civil society, was pushing on him. Dad brought him back, prevented him from physically living that way, and tried to get him intellectually away from it by teaching him Taoism, bringing in Taoist teachers who praised the 5 elements and the yin-yang theory and taught him, methods of meditation and stuff. Master Empty Cloud said, that's good, that's not ultimate. That doesn't lead to freedom that I'm looking for. So you can see that this young man from an early age demonstrated that he was not ordinary. He was unusual. So we've been following this evolution of a spiritual leader, and yet this is the amazing thing. As people who actually saw him and described his physical affect. We had a laywoman, Fang Guowu, whose father in Shanghai actually invited Master Empty Cloud to his home at one point to speak Dharma and describe the experience. He said that when Master Empty Cloud he came into a room, and people would just, like iron filings to a magnet, people would just be stuck up next to him. Just magnetically, he would attract a crowd of people around him who would just put red envelopes in his hands and bow to him and ask him all these questions. And Fang Guowu's father said that he didn't talk in response. He would stand there with his eyes closed and his prayer beads in his hand, and he would be reciting the Buddha's name. Namo Mitoha, Namo Mitoha, Namo Mitoha. And people would having his presence in there among them, they were so excited that they would be bowing and asking him questions. And Mr. Fang reported that he had a friend of his, had a situation at home that he had disharmony. His son's wife didn't get along with his wife. So the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law conflict. And he really didn't know what to do. And he said his friend bowed to Master Empty Cloud and asked him the question. And Xuyun Lao Heshang, Master Empty Cloud, didn't say a word. And the man, after bowing, said, why couldn't I? That's so wonderful. Thank you for your compassion and your regard. I'm so pleased. And he was delighted with the answer he got wordlessly, somehow. He was like that. He could answer your questions silently, reciting the Buddha's name with his beads, with his eyes shut, not looking at you either. He had that kind of presence. So, all right, now we meet him halfway through his life, and he's 60 years old. He has just recently gotten enlightened. He's recently awakened. We can hear all those noises, everybody, by the way. If you could, you're broadcasting around the world every noise we make in this room. So he lived to be 120, which is one of those remarkable facts about our teacher. But what I wanted to point out today was that he, after he finished his pilgrimage from Putoshan all the way to Wutaishan, 3,000 Chinese miles, probably 1,000 Western miles, bowing to the ground every third step, he arrived at Wutaishan and joined the Chan session immediately afterwards, then traveled around the 5 peaks of Wutai, and then he continued his pilgrimage, his journey on foot, walking to Tibet, among other places, and then down to Burma, Myanmar, and then back up, and then through Sichuan, and through all of the southwest Yunnan province. And then he kept on walking. Currently, he went to Jiuhuashan in Anhui province, heard about the Chan session, went down carrying the wishes of his fellow hermits on Jiuhuashan, fell into the river, nearly drowned, got fished out miles down the river after bumping along all night, went to the Chan session, was invited to hold a position in the session, refused, which required him to be beaten with a board. So now he is more dead than alive, yet his vigor requires him to sit in the Chan session, but he doesn't have to move now because he refused holding a job, lighting incense or giving talks. And a few weeks into the Chan session, he gets enlightened. His mind opens up finally after all this work, age 56. So after this experience, he travels to Ningbo, and something surfaces again in his mind, which is he feels he has not repaid his mother's kindness for giving birth to him and then dying. He carries this burden that his arrival was a cause for his mother's departure. And that is foremost in his mind. So he goes to King Ashoka Monastery, Ayu Wangsi in Ningbo. Famous monastery because Ayu Wangsi carries the Buddha's sharira, relics, genuine relics of Shakyamuni Buddha, which are said to be very magical and able to deliver miracles and wonderful responses to when people bow to these sharira. So he starts making prostrations to the Buddha's sharira, and sure enough, he feels like he's not bowing enough, although he's bowing night and day. He starts to make 3,000 bows per day, which requires, if you do the math, that's a lot of fast bowing. And he goes on, and then an illness arises, some sort of karmic illness, which pretty much makes him, there, as the biography, this is our biography that we're following, it's pretty obvious that he's going to die. He's not going to survive this illness. And further, he has made a promise that he's going to burn off one of his fingers as an offering to the Buddha. And there's a disclaimer that comes in, which is, kids, don't try this at home, right? Don't think, oh, cool, me too. Buddhists are supposed to do that. No, that's not the case. Not that Buddhists are supposed to. My poor mother, when she found out that I was going to be a Buddhist monk, she asked me, does that mean you have to burn your body? She said, because the picture of Thich Quang Duc, the Vietnamese monk who had done that very thing, was a photograph that shocked the entire world back then. So it is not the case that you have to burn your body as a Buddhist monk. But it is a choice that some people make as an offering in a very controlled way, and it only works if you have genuine samadhi. So, ill to the point of death, he has to convince the abbot of Ayuwang Monastery to let him do it, because the abbot, although quite young, had wisdom and said, you're going to die. I don't want you to die in my monastery on my watch, so please don't do it. Well, Master Empty Cloud says, I would rather die than not fulfill my vow and repay my mother's kindness. So I left out a part of the story, which is, these are kind of the highlights of this life. We skip right over the pilgrimage, which took 36 episodes out of our 200 episodes. So he was bowing and bowing and bowing, and what happened was he was sitting out by the Liberating Life pond in front of King Ashoka Monastery, and a dragon came down out of the sky, parked his body beside Master Empty Cloud, gestured that the monk should get on his back, and he did, and the dragon flew off and showed him a vista of palaces up in the heavens with his mother happily embroidering there, peaceful, safe, secure in mind and body. So he got a vision. Now you say, yeah, dragons come down in Ningbo, China a lot, right? This is how the story goes. Master Shenhua, our teacher, heard Master Empty Cloud in person describe this experience. He described it as Si Meng, Fi Meng, like dream-like, but maybe a dream. But it was a remarkable, incredible state of being that carried Master Empty Cloud to fulfillment of his vow. Now, I skip that out of sequence. Now comes back. What does he do? Continues to bow. That's when the illness sets in. He decides he's going to burn his finger all the same. Convinces the abbot to let him do it. He has the support team necessary for this thing to happen. And sure enough, goes through the steps required in the monastery to make this offering, burns his finger, and instantly his illness is over. He's somehow paid back his karmic debt in this process. So, yeah, you go, good grief, being a monk, even someone said to be an 8-stage bodhisattva, not so simple, not so easy. All right, that takes us to where we are now, which is the travelogue of China's sacred geography continues. The same way we got to see Tibet, we got to see Burma, we got to see Chickenfoot Mountain with Maitreya, or with Maitreya Bodhisattva there, and his presence caused these giant bells to ring in space that hadn't happened for 200 years, and et cetera, et cetera. So this continues. Now, we're with Master Empty Cloud as he goes east towards Shandong province. And we found out that there is a place called Narayana Cave. This was last week. He's 61 years old. The year is 1900. And anybody who knows anything about 20th century Chinese history, this is the first year of the 20th century, mind you, knows that a major event happened in 1899 to 1901, which was the Boxer Rebellion. The Yi Tuan Yundong happened during these years, and it happened in Shandong, was the place where he is now, where the Boxer Rebellion took place, which was a bloody event that ushered in foreign presence in China, foreign military, the 8 Guo Lianjun, the 8 countries' armies came into China at this point. Okay, so here he is. Now, what we learned last week, let's look quickly I want to reprise this because I've got some photos that I think might be interesting. Let's read quickly here. This is 110 out of 200 episodes. It's called Chao Fang No Lo Yan Ku, Visiting Narayana Cave. That's a typo, cave. Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Yun, Zhen Dan Guo You Shan Ming No Lo Yan Ku Shan, 有无量菩萨之住说法，即至此处，位于山东半岛尽头。崂山名高僧憨山老人在此苦测，建海阴寺，后被道师毁坏，毫无痕迹存在矣。The Mahavaipuya Buddha Avatamsaka Sutra, which is the Flower Garland Sutra, Avatamsaka, says, there's a mountain in China called Narayana Cave Mountain where limitless numbers of bodhisattvas live and expound the Dharma. The place referred to in the sutra is situated at the tip of the Shandong Peninsula on Lao Mountain. Near the cave, the eminent Ming monk, Master Han Shan, this is Han Shan De Qing, not the poet of the Tang, established Haiyin Ocean Seal Monastery, later destroyed by the Taoists. Today, not so much of a trace of it remains. Here's the artist's rendering. It's in the mountains. There's a cave. He's bowing at the door of the cave. Master Hua's poem goes like this. 大方广佛华严经诺罗延枯早说明，无量菩萨正言法，有缘众生入化中。In the Mahavaipuya Buddha Avatamsaka Sutra, the Narayana cave was named clearly some time ago. Limitless numbers of bodhisattvas now proclaim the Dharma there, and living beings who have the affinities master these teachings. Okay, take a look here. Here we are. Now, we heard about Laoshan, which we heard on the tip of the Shandong Peninsula. Yes, indeed. Right there. Here is Shandong. Here is Qingdao. And if you go up a little bit, you find Korea. Over there, you find Beijing and Manchuria up further. So here is Shandong. Korea is there, right across China Sea. Manchuria, Dongbei, is up here, above it. So Shandong is, if you can think of a map of America, it would be the state of Maine, if you think of Australia, it's Cairns and above, northern Queensland. So there we are, right there. Now, what's going on at Narayana Cave? Take a look. It's incredibly rugged, incredibly beautiful, scenic spot. It's now become a tourist spot, and we mentioned last week that Cliff Wang's hometown is just a couple miles away. Grew up around here, interestingly. So here's the cave, and it looks out into the ocean. Spectacular place. Now, we look at the photos. Here's from inside the cave looking out. You look at the photos and you think, that's interesting. So people go there and look at this beautiful spot. What's the big deal? Why was Master Empty Cloud bowing? Because of the beauty of the landscape? No, not only, but because the Avatamsaka Sutra says in a chapter, now a text that was spoken by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, says in Zhendan Guo, which is the way the Indians talked about China, there is a cave called Narayana Cave. Narayana means indomitable, unbeatable strength, where bodhisattvas live and teach. And you go, that's interesting. I thought that the sutra is kind of like magical sutra, timeless and all, and it's telling you about a place in China that you can go take a picture of. That's interesting. Furthermore, it says in the same chapter of the Avatamsaka, which is called Places Where Bodhisattvas Live, is the name of the chapter. It says, in China, you will find Qingliang Shan, clear and cool mountain, where Manjushri Bodhisattva lives. That is Wu Tai Shan. That's another name for Wu Tai Shan. So, in other words, China, what we now call China, back in the time of the Buddha, had places that were identified as spiritual power spots where bodhisattvas live. How interesting, right? This interplay of the sacred and the mundane, just fascinating. How this, you think, I didn't realize that the Avatamsaka was still alive in the same way. Okay, interesting. And I want to put in a plug. We are engaged in retranslating chapters of the Avatamsaka that kind of got translated back in the 80s and could use a refresher now. And in this chapter called Shijie Changjiupin, Creating the Worlds, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva is touring us through the formation of the worlds through the Buddha's eyes. He talks about world seeds. He talks about Mount Sumeru. He talks about world seeds have 20 layers. The Saha world, which is the name of our world, is on layer number 13, he says. And he describes them. And all the different worlds, they're all different. Some are made of iron and full of the sounds of suffering. They're made of fire and rock. Others are made of lotus flowers, and people there live in bliss. And he says it all comes from the karma made by the mind. So it's like, oh. Our world, Saha, is half blissful and half meant to be endured, meaning tough. So it's a great place to live, because the suffering here reminds you to cultivate, to get out, or if you're a bodhisattva type, to stick around so that others can get out, right? So it's half and half. And so this is a great place to cultivate, because you recognize old age, sickness, and death and rebirth are coming for us all, and it's just a matter of time. So nobody escapes that unless you find the Buddha Dharma, in which case here's the way out. So that's our Saha world, as described by Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. So if Samantabhadra is there talking about Buddhist geography, and there's a chapter that describes Narayana Cave in Shandong Province and Qingliang Mountain in Shanxi Province, are they both absolutely real places? Interesting. Okay, I find that fascinating. Alrighty, here we go. Today's first chapter. We ready? Here we go. It's 1900. The Boxer Rebellion is happening. He is 61 years old, and it's the 26th year of the Guangxu Emperor. There's only 11 years of the Chinese dynasty, the Chinese Empire left before the time of the Republic of China begins, 1911. Okay, here we go. 儒教大成至圣孔子庙，乃中国文化创始者孔丘之纪念庙宇也。位于山东曲阜县，对于中国历史文化具重要性之价值。共以仰慕孔仲尼道的文章故来此。观礼孔庙、孔陵以示意。Qufu County in Shandong Province hosts the temple commemorating Confucius, the foremost sage of Chinese culture, whose achievements were most significant. Confucianism is an important element in Chinese civilization, and it holds a very important place in history of the Chinese culture. The master greatly admired Confucius' virtue and his scholarship. He visited the temple and tomb of Confucius to pay his respects. Here he is, looking like a Buddhist pilgrim. He's got his straw hat, sun hat, on a string around his neck. His robes are patched. He's wearing his Chinese monk wazi and his Chinese arhat shoes. He's in a courtyard of a temple. There's an old tree. There's a censer. There are tourists, well-to-do people standing around, looking around. And it's the artist gives us a place that looks kind of beaten up, kind of well used. It's not pristine. It's not wealthy. Confucius was not one for ostentatious luxury, right? So his temple reflects that tradition. Okay, what does the verse say? The verse says, 大在孔子道德高，万事千秋皆师表。三千门人从教化，七十学者入门墙。Shifu's verse just always hits the spot exactly. Great indeed is Confucius, whose virtue is lofty, a role model for a myriad generations and thousands of years. From 3,000 pupils whom this master taught came but 70 outstanding scholars who furthered his school. So to make sense of that, we need to know a little bit about Confucius's history as a teacher. And people who hear about Master Xuyun Lecture assume that he taught Buddhism. Certainly he did, but he taught Confucianism as vigorously as he taught Buddhism. That is to say, by day, we got lectures on the 4 books. People who have come later to DRBA, to our association, missed that aspect of Master Hua's teaching, which is during the day, we learned the Xiaojing, the classic of filial respect. We learned Di Zi Gui, the standards for students. we learned about the Qianzi Wen and the Sanzi Jing and the Baijia Xing and the Mengzi and the Lunyu and the Zhongyong and the Daxiao. Those are the four, what are known as the four books of Confucius. The Great Learning, the Doctrine of the Mean, the Mencius, and the Analects. And Shifu lectured on them just the way he lectured on Buddhist sutras, line by line. And with Shifu's style, Confucius came alive. And the Confucius that we heard about was not the Confucius who, sadly, I think, as any teacher whose teachings have been around for 1,000 years, gets kind of ossified, gets kind of stuck. Confucius presented to young people in China or Taiwan or Hong Kong today is very much, kind of frozen in history and doesn't bring forward the humanity of the teacher. Shifu, when he explained Confucius, made him come alive. He presented, for example, in the Analects, or the Great Learning, Confucius is always asking his disciples, what do you think about the Duke of Zhou? Or what do you think about the rulers of Lu? And he's very much in a kind of the same way that Plato taught or Socrates taught his students. It was dialogue. And the students go, well, we think this. And Confucius would say, wrong. Nope, you got that wrong. Didn't you miss the fact that he was selfish in this decision? And it's like, oh, okay. Shifu would get a story like that and turn it into a lesson on cultivation of the mind. The way Master Hua presented Confucius, the teachings of the mind in the Analects were no different than the teachings of the mind in the Avatamsaka Sutra. It all pointed back to how you responded with principle to situations. Were you selfish, or did you transform the self, right? So Confucius came alive, and his skill as a teacher and his care for his students, his compassion for his students was just so relevant, so real in the way Master Hua taught. So I developed a real strong interest in Confucius, and so did Heng Chao, Marty Verhoeven. We got copies of English translations of the Analects and James Leggie's translations and other Burton Watson's translations. And we learned them. We memorized them. Of course, particularly the Great Commonwealth, 大通篇, 孔子礼遇大通篇, 大道之行者, 天下为公, right? When the Great Way is taught, everything under heaven is public, is made public, is open up, is common cause, is common open source, So very wonderful things to hear about Confucius from Master Xuyun Hua, as if he embodied these principles. And so we learned Confucius, that his history was that he felt himself a failure. He wasn't able to interest the rulers of the time in teaching fair government. Could somebody shut the door? That'll just help. It won't be quite so loud. Yeah, thank you. So that Confucius, he wanted 天下太平. He wanted there to be a benefit for all beings. He saw humanity as capable of leading the world towards the 大通世界, the world that was the great commonwealth, where everybody had enough for their needs and nobody had more for their greed. That was his goal. And he also wanted a world where the elders and widows and the disadvantaged, orphans were all cared for. That was his Confucius's vision. He knew people could do it, we were capable of it, but it was simply our selfishness and our greed that prevented it. So that was how Master Hua presented Confucius. And so this, let's take a look. We're back in Shandong province again, and here we are. Here is Confucius Temple in Shandong in Qufu, where Confucius actually lived. And the Kong family, Kong Fuzi is Chinese for Confucius. The Kong family is still alive. Still, his descendants still count the number of generations that have passed from the time of Confucius. And Confucius was a contemporary of the Buddha. This is the 6th century before the Common Era. So this is the Kong Miao in Qufu. People who've never seen what it's like. It's a big park area. I have actually never been to Qufu yet. I've been to Qingdao, but not up further north. So someday I hope to get a chance to look. As I've mentioned, the Chinese government has done a really nice job of making these historical sites accessible. They're clean. There's parking lots. There are bathrooms. There's tours. There are materials. You know, it's done really nicely without commercialism, the way you might expect. It's not a theme park. Here is Confucius. There he is. His picture, he's got his hands together. He looks worried about his students. Will they succeed? Will they understand what I have in mind? And the answer is pretty much no. It was only a few years after Confucius passed away that pretty much all of his students disappeared into the world. They didn't stick around. He didn't create generations of students, you know, who remembered. So the Temple of Confucius, also called the Temple of the Supreme Saint, is the place to offer sacrifice to Confucius. Born in 551 BCE, died in 479, Confucius was considered a famous ancient thinker, statesman, and educator. He was a teacher. He loved learning and opening minds to the potential for humanity to do good in the world. He dominated the feudal society and influenced countries, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Yeah. So actually, if you think, where did Confucian teachings flourish? Korea. There are principles of Confucianism embedded in the Constitution of Korea, the founding documents of South Korea right now, North Korea. So here is you can see the gift shop hasn't been made commercial. You can buy the classics, but it's much more about open space, places where people can deliver lectures, can investigate the arts and such, and discover these principles of humanity that have become the principles that are the foundation of Asian culture, definitely. So China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, all celebrate Confucian values. They occasionally do these ceremonies that are pretty meaningless. People have forgotten the value of this, but it's something to look at. Now, I wanted to say that while I have never been to Qufu, you see what a large area is set aside there. I have been to the Kong Miao in Taipei, and there is a very nice, beautiful Confucian temple in Taiwan, in Taipei, and I'm told that mostly people don't go there. we got a chance, myself and Dharma Master Jinyong just toured the Confucian temple in Taipei just 2 months ago. And it's a lovely, just like you saw in Qufu, and mostly school tours go through. When they teach Guoxue, the Chinese cultural history, a tour will go to the Kongmiao and everybody learns a song, and you learn some of the stories of Confucius' disciples, and everybody gets to pick up a maobi, a writing brush, and write a poem for the spring and such things. So the government hopes to, just like the Chinese government likes young people to remember Confucius and the values of the founding of their cultural values. But it's a losing battle to smartphones and deep-seek AI technology. It's because it's dry. Confucius is, what I like about this process of keeping him alive, and how, when I see how much time Master Hua dedicated in America to teaching Confucius, there's clearly something to pay attention to here. And what our teacher said was, America is a young place. It's been around, and Australia would fall right in with it. The history of white people, European people coming to America isn't 300 years old. Same story in Australia, barely 300 years old. So how much the less do these folks understand how to unpack and discover the goodness of human nature? They are still conquering nature, external nature. And in China, where this culture has been in a straight line for 5,000 years, Chinese Wen, the literary culture, Confucius has been celebrated in China for 2,500 years. They've had a longer opportunity to discover what it means to be a good human, living among other humans in a natural setting. So he said it's important for America to turn inward, to look at the heart, to look at the nature, and learn how to live in a way that doesn't harm others. So, 己所不欲，勿施于人. Things you don't want done to you, don't do to others. The golden rule was something that Confucius completely taught. And the deepest value of, let's see here, I know I've got it right here. Here we are. I want to take just another second here. Confucius said, 大道之行也，天下为公. When the great spiritual path, the Tao, is practiced, everything is shared. 选贤育能，讲信录目. When the virtuous and able are chosen for public office, integrity and friendliness are valued by all. 故人不独亲其亲，不独子其子. People cherish not only their own parents and children, but cherish the children and parents of others as well. 是老有所终，壮有所用，幼有所长. The elderly live their last years in happiness. Able-bodied adults are usefully employed. Children are properly reared. 今孤寡独，废疾者，皆有所养. Widowers, widows, orphans, and the childless, aged, the crippled, and the ailing are well cared for. 男有分，女有归. All men share their social responsibilities. All women have their respective roles. 或物弃于地也，不必藏于己. Natural resources are used fully for the benefit of all, not wasted or appropriated for selfish ends. 利物弃不出于身也，不必为己. People want to contribute their strength and ability to society for the public good, not for private gain. 是故某必而不信. Trickery and cheating could not occur in such a society, Elon Musk. 道家乱罪而不作. Robbery, banditry, rebellions, and other crimes all disappear. 故外户而不闭. Gates and doors are not locked. No one ever thinks of stealing. 是谓大同. This is the age of the great commonwealth of peace and prosperity. There it is. This is the Kongzi Liyun Datong Pian, the great commonwealth. So there we have it. That's a capsule statement of how Master Xuyun presented Confucius to us in America in the 20th century and now in the 21st century. So how wonderful. And we have Master Empty Cloud greatly admiring Confucius's virtue and his scholarship. He visited the temple and tomb of Confucius to pay his respects. So how much is Confucius not a stiff, fuddy-duddy, boring, droning lecture on civics? He is a living model of how a life can be well lived, full of meaning and benefit beyond my own personal appetites. All right, that's it for today. Now, next week we've got some exciting Master Empty Cloud encounters the Boxer Rebellion next week. Oh boy, so you don't want to miss that. Students of the calligraphy class, do not forget to bring your textbooks and do your homework. Meeting tomorrow morning. Word to the wise. Let's make a wish. Here we go. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Alrighty, that's going to do it for us for today. I'd like to invite you to join me in bowing to Guanyin Bodhisattva. We can do 3 bows. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. That's all for us for today. See you all next week, everybody. Amitofo. Bye now.